Joining me now, live, Nick Freitas' office, Schuyler VanVolkenburgh, Delegate VanVolkenburgh. Welcome, Delegate.
Thanks for having me on, John.
Thanks for being here. I really appreciate it. Let's turn your mic up a little bit. And lots to cover today. Lots of things that you're involved in. First of all, high school teacher. Tell everybody where and what do you teach?
Yeah, sure. So I teach government to 12th graders, AP Government and Honors Government at Glen Ellen High School in Henrico County. I've been in the county for 15 years, at the high school level for 10. And so my day job is a pretty cool job. I get to talk about the Constitution every day, case law, its history, where we're at now. And so that's my day job.
I tell you what, it's now that my oldest son, who's 30 in a couple of weeks, is teaching in high school. He's in a Title I school, Clarksdale, Mississippi, 99% African American, 98% under the poverty line.
Yeah. So
it's the stories he tells me. His thing is, if I try to make an impact on every student I have, some positive impact. But it's a tough job.
Well, I heard you say he coaches 3 sports, and I think, people don't understand the amount of work that goes into being a teacher and then doing the 3 sports. And that's
then trying to prepare for your class the next day.
That's more than a full-time job, and so that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, he works till midnight, gets up at 6 a.m. But he loves the kids at school, and then he gets to coach them, and if they have to play for him.
And coaching is a great way to get to know them outside of the class and to create that bond. And I coached for a little bit, and I had to give it up once I started having kids because I have 3 kids. And so,
what did you coach?
I coached football for a little bit. I coached wrestling, neither sports of which I was particularly good at or played. But it's just part of the process of they need people to coach, they need people to help. And so I got to be assistant coach in wrestling. It was one of the best kind of side gigs within teaching that I was able to do in the last 15 years.
Outstanding. And thank you for what you do, Schuyler.
Thank you. Okay,
let's get to some of the hot button issues here. I'm going to start with a couple of things that you're very familiar of because you're carrying them. Number one is the One Virginia redistricting legislation that you're a sponsor of.
Sure.
That passed the House the last time, if memory serves me, 86-13.
Sounds right.
One Republican voted no, Lee Ware. When I asked him why he voted no, he didn't give me a straight answer, so I figured out he just likes his district because you can't beat him, so he doesn't want to change it. So he voted no. So we've already talked to enough people in the state Senate. We're convinced it's going to pass again to get on the ballot, but it's got to get out of the House.
Sure.
And it's first passes the committee that you're on, Rules and, Privileges and Elections. There's talk now that the chairman of that, Joe Lindsay, is going to bottle it up in the subcommittee. Can he do that? And by the way, Joe was opposed to it the first time and was probably the most emphatic critic, I would say.
I would step back for a second, and I would say I think redistricting reform is something that's I think going to happen this session, and I think what you're seeing there's a bunch of different moving parts to it because there's the amendment piece, which we passed last year, both the House and Senate, and we have to pass again to go to the ballot. There's also the enacting legislation that would go with it that would flesh it out. So for the people listening, the amendment itself creates an independent commission, but it doesn't really tell the independent commission what to do or how the independent commission is created. And so we also have to have the enacting legislation that goes with it. And that enacting legislation does everything from create the process for the membership, set the criteria for what they have to prioritize when they're creating the lines, and tell the Supreme Court, if it gets kicked to the Supreme Court, how they are supposed to act. And so I think what you're seeing is a kind of robust discussion about what that criteria and what that enabling legislation should look like. And I think you're going to see Democrats all fall behind one enabling legislation, but making sure that's right is really a priority. And I think that's where we are right now, which is separate from the amendment, right? Is making sure we get the enabling legislation correct. Could the chairman bottle up the amendment? I suppose he could. With parliamentary tactics. Do I think that's going to happen? No, I don't think that's going to happen. But right now we're just in that process whereby we're trying to make it as good as we can. And anytime you put something in the Constitution, you want to be thoughtful.
Right. But you can't change the amendment, right?
Right.
It's got to
No.
be the same. So,
Right.
so when Levine gets up and makes speeches about how the amendment's got to get fixed, you got to pass the same thing.
Right.
The enabling legislation can be negotiated.
Correct.
But the actual amendment, that's got to pass. So, look, I have a calculator, right?
Right.
And I do math.
Right.
So I look at the members of the Elections and Privileges Committee, of which you're a member
Yeah.
of, and so was Sam Rasool,
Yep.
who's also a sponsor of the bill, and the young lady Shelley Simons is for it. All the Republicans are for it. So I do the math. It's going to get out of the committee. If it gets out of committee, you've got on the floor probably 70 some odd votes.
Right.
So the only way Joe Lindsay, who's a chairman, can stop it is if he stacks the subcommittee with people that don't let it get out. So my question is, can an overall committee get it out of a subcommittee? Because all the subcommittee can do is make a recommendation.
Right.
So can the advocates of it get it discharged anyway? That's my question.
Yeah, I think that could happen, but I don't think we're going to get there, right? I think that you're taking us down a road of trying to sow conflict here. I don't think that's where we're going to be.
You think it's just going to get out of committee and get to the floor?
I think what you're seeing right now, and there are people in our caucus who are against it. I mean, we had, I think it was 12 voted against it last time. But I think what you have in the Democratic caucus is you have people who want to get redistricting reform done, and we want to do it in a conscientious way. And we really want to make sure, and I'm going to go back to my previous point because I do think it's the most important part, is that we want to make sure that the enacting legislation is as good as it can be, because that's really going to be the effectiveness of the amendment, and that's really going to be the effectiveness of redistricting reform, is how good the process is and how tight that criteria is to making sure that the lines are fair. And so I think once we get that stepped in, I'm carrying the amendment. I'm hopeful that the amendment will pass. I think the amendment, it was a compromise from the original version, but I think it's a solid amendment. I think it has the transparency piece, which is super important. It has the kind of what I call the filtration piece of multiple steps for how you get each member of the committee, how you get all the circuit court judges who pick them. So it has that piece. It has the criteria piece that I think is very important. And I think one of the more important things is it ranks the order of criteria. So it says you have to, when you make these lines, you have to take this into account first. You have to take this into account second. And so it prioritizes communities of interest. It prioritizes making sure that racial and language minorities are protected. And so I think we're going to get there. To your point about the committee, yeah, I think your questions are correct. I just don't think we're going to get to that point.
So look, if it gets out of subcommittee, you got the votes in the committee. That amendment is going to pass, and the enabling legislation can be negotiated.
Right.
And I'm sure you come to an agreement
Right.
with that. But basically, it takes the bottom line is, one of our listeners text me, how do we make the lines fair? This is taking the drawing of lines out of the hands of politicians picking their constituents and their power and putting it in the hands of a committee that's made up of elected officials, citizens,
Yep.
and others. And so it's negotiated, but it's on a nonpartisan basis, and it is citizen-driven,
Yep.
which I think is the core of this amendment. Okay, so I feel good about that. Thank you for your advocacy of that.
Yeah.
Let's get to gaming.
Yeah.
Start with casinos. We're going to get some kind of a casino passing. Here's the big issue. You pass casinos in Virginia. You got two issues immediately. You've got the Pamunkey Indians
Right.
that just signed the deal with the city of Norfolk, Virginia, $200 million if they get a license.
Yep.
You don't want to screw the Indians again because they've already been screwed a million times. And they're recognized, and now they deserve this, and they've been at the forefront of it. You've also got Rosie's Gaming and Colonial Downs have put $300 million in the state, and they've created 1,000 jobs, and they're biggest money producers in Richmond.
Right.
Is there a compromise? That's my question.
Yeah, I think the answer is yes. It's so early in the process, and there's a lot we need to do, and I'm on the subcommittee that's going to be seeing a lot of that work. And I think, I'm going into it with an open mind. I'm really digging into the JLARC report, which was they did a presentation yesterday before the full General Laws Committee, and seeing what they say. And I do think that there's a compromise to be had there. And what that looks like, I'm going to be honest, in this moment, I don't know. There's a lot of different, as you mentioned, well, let's start with casinos. There's so many different threads to this. There's casinos, there's sports gambling, there's the gray machines, there's Rosie's and the horse track. And to my mind, there's two kinds of things there. Is when we are talking about what this legislation will be, making sure that if we pull on one thread, the whole thing doesn't unravel, and we create this imbalance, the Richmond casino, right? If there ends up being a Richmond casino, that takes the biggest hit off the horse track. But also doing it in a way where, to my mind, we're doing it effectively, but we're doing it so that we're not hurting communities. One thing I would like to not see out of any potential gaming is I don't want to see a proliferation of gaming all through, say Henrico County, where I represent, in every community, in every neighborhood. I am most supportive of the casinos, destination gambling, and kind of most skeptical of these kind of no-skill gray machines that we see popping up all over the Commonwealth. And so I do think there's a compromise, and I'm being vague because I'm not sure what it is.
But I think what you're saying is you're in favor of casinos because it's a destination.
Yeah.
Whether it's Danville, Bristol, Richmond, Pamunkeys in Norfolk, Hampton Roads, whatever it is, you have to go to a casino.
Yeah.
Right? Rather than go to the 7-Eleven.
Right.
I mean, it's getting kind of creepy, I got to tell you.
Yeah.
Every convenience store I go in now has one of these machines. I don't know who regulates them, if they're regulated, but you look at the people playing them, it's not. I don't think it's a good thing.
Well, and it happened overnight.
They're not regulated.
Yeah, it happened, and it's something we're going to have to deal with this session.
You're going to have to deal with it.
It happened almost overnight. We were having our meeting with the local Henrico government, and they were saying, these things just overnight popped up in all of our restaurants and all of our 7-Elevens and gas stations, and they're worried about it from a public safety perspective, and so it is something we're going to have to regulate or ban, and there's bills for both. I think Janet Howell's carrying some in the Senate, if my mind serves me correctly. And there was an article about it in this morning's Richmond Times-Dispatch, and Aubrey Lane is concerned about them as well from a financial standpoint and the damage that they do to the lottery.
So you got your work cut out for you,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
On casinos, what to do with the Pamunkeys,
yep.
Because they have a right to get their casino now that they've got recognition. And then also Rosie's Gaming and Colonial Downs, they put $300 million in this industry. They're employing right now 1,000 people.
Yeah.
1,000 people have jobs, good jobs. And so they have to be protected because their problem is if they don't get a casino license on the same footing as others that are awarded, the horse racing gaming machines is an inferior product to a full-service casino. So they go out of business.
Well, and to your point, the JLARC study showed that they could lose up to 45% of their revenue with a Richmond casino.
Yeah, so they, to my thing is they should get a license in Richmond, and then maybe you give the Monkeys the opportunity wherever they go. But, of course, whatever happens is going to go through Louise Lucas. Okay, so basically you have the Pamunkeys, you have Colonial Downs, and then you have Louise Lucas, and you got to balance all three of those because was somebody that said to me the other day, who is it that said to me the other day, one of your colleagues said, there's three caucuses, there's three Democratic caucuses, the Northern Virginia caucus, the Black caucus, and then none of the above. So you must fit in the none of the above caucus,
that's
being in Richmond. Okay, so let's get to gaming, betting, football, basketball, baseball, bookmaking, gambling. Mark Sickles' bill makes it mobile. You do it right on your phone.
Right.
Rather than Chap Peterson, which is brick and mortar, which is my father's way of gambling at OTBs in 1973, which I don't know where Chap Peterson came up with this, but it shows he's getting a little long in the tooth. So how do you stand on that?
Yeah, the Sickles bill.
Chap Peterson wants you to go to a bookmaking outfit in what, downtown Fairfax? I mean, come on, Chap.
I'm from upstate New York, so the OTBs, you had OTB in every town.
You did, but you had to go. I mean, that's what your father did, right? They drive downtown to the OTB.
Yeah, I think the Sickles bill is going to be the driving kind of mechanism for whatever happens. And I'll be vague again, and mostly because I want to know more before I kind of come down on what I think is important in that bill and what I can be for and what I can't be for. But I think that's going to be the driving bill, and I think we're going to see something come out of the House and Senate along the lines of what Sickles is proposing.